There's a dangerous illusion that permeates nearly every personal development conversation. The idea that wanting something deeply, passionately, obsessively will magnetize it into your life. That if you just want it enough, think about it enough, obsess over it with intensity, the universe will respond. But as Owen Hermstring explains in The Law Behind the Laws, this is exactly where most people unconsciously anchor themselves into energetic poverty. Why? Because pure desire, when untethered from a frequency of wholeness, becomes an energetic declaration of lack. Wanting is often misunderstood as a form of attraction, but in Hermstring's view, it is actually a vibrational statement that says, I don't have this, I'm separate from it, it's not mine. And because energy responds to the dominant signal, what the universe picks up is not your vision board, or your prayer, or your affirmations. It picks up your energetic position. And if that position is I want it because I don't have it, you reinforce the very experience of not having. In his chapter on magnetic misfires, Hermstring writes, the more you want, the more you say you lack. The universe does not read your words. It reads your vibration. And your vibration always tells the truth of what you believe you are. This sentence alone dismantles the foundation of most law of attraction strategies. It reminds us that the universe doesn't care about what you say you want. It responds to what you are in frequency. So how does desire become a trap? It happens when wanting becomes chronic. You see it in people who jump from one vision to the next, always chasing a better job, a better relationship, a better version of themselves. They live in a constant state of almost, always reaching but never arriving. Their energetic field becomes filled with projections, not embodiment. And as Hermstring clarifies, projection without embodiment is a hollow broadcast. It echoes into nothingness. In other words, the desire has no magnetic pull because the person behind it is not anchored in the frequency of already having, already being, already becoming. To break this loop, Hermstring suggests a radical shift. Stop desiring and start declaring, not verbally, but vibrationally. Instead of saying, I want wealth, become the version of you who calmly and naturally navigates life with the energy of wealth already encoded in their field. Walk differently. Speak with different cadence. Choose from a place of sufficiency, not scarcity. Desire becomes powerful only when it is paired with identity-level certainty. Otherwise, it's just a mirror of your current disconnection. One of the most powerful distinctions Hermstring introduces is the idea of emotional sufficiency versus emotional craving. Craving, he explains, is rooted in fear and wounded time, the energy that says, it hasn't happened yet, and I'm afraid it never will. Sufficiency, on the other hand, is the deep embodied frequency of, I am already the one who receives. This isn't about pretending or faking it. It's about shifting your nervous system out of lack and into alignment. Because when your body feels it's safe to receive, reality has no choice but to respond. So next time you catch yourself saying, I want, pause. Ask yourself, from where is this desire coming? Is it an echo of your pain, a cover-up for your fear? Or is it a natural signal from your higher identity, inviting you to align rather than chase? When you stop feeding the illusion of want, you step into the field where the manifestation begins to move toward you. Not because you're running after it, but because you've stopped running away from yourself. Most people don't realize that their biggest obstacle to manifestation isn't external, it's internal. According to Owen Hermstring, the real war isn't about circumstances, lack of resources or timing. It's about identity dissonance, the conflict between what you consciously say you want and what you subconsciously believe you deserve. This inner split is the silent killer of manifestation. You can visualize all you want, but if your self-image isn't aligned with your desired reality, nothing truly changes. Hermstring writes in The Law Behind the Laws, the universe is obedient to your frequency, not your fantasy. That one sentence shifts everything, because most people live in a state of internal contradiction. They want love, but carry deep stories of abandonment. They want wealth, but feel shame around money. They want recognition, but fear being seen. In energetic terms, these are mixed signals, and the universe, Hermstring says, always responds to the dominant vibration, which usually comes from the subconscious, not the conscious. This is what he calls the worthiness paradox. On the surface, we affirm, "I deserve better," but underneath we vibrate with guilt, fear, or unworthiness, and that deep-seated emotional signature becomes our true magnetic field. You attract not what you desire, Hermstring notes, but what you unconsciously agree to. So every unresolved belief, every scar from childhood, every voice that once told you you're too much or you're not enough, becomes part of your energetic agreement with life. To shift this, Hermstring doesn't recommend surface-level confidence tricks. He goes deeper, inviting people to reconstruct their internal contracts. Ask, who did I agree to be in order to survive? Did I agree to be small to stay safe, invisible to stay loved, quiet to avoid rejection? These unspoken survival strategies form the core of identity, and no amount of positive thinking can override them until they are made conscious. One of his most powerful exercises is writing a new worthiness script. But it's not about writing what you want, it's about writing who you are when you already have what you want. The idea is to train the nervous system to feel safe in a new identity, so your frequency naturally aligns with it. This means acting, thinking, and feeling like the version of you who already is that person, not to fake it, but to rewire your energetic baseline. But here's where many people sabotage the process. They demand external validation before internal transformation. They want reality to shift first so they can finally believe in themselves. But as Hermstring warns, reality is a lagging mirror. It doesn't confirm your desires and it reflects your agreements. In other words, the world reflects back the story you live, not the dream you occasionally visit. This identity conflict is why people feel like their efforts never yield lasting results. They take action from a place of misalignment. They network while secretly fearing rejection. They pursue goals with the underlying belief that they'll never be good enough. And because the energy behind the action carries resistance, the outcomes feel blocked or inconsistent. True manifestation, Hermstring teaches, is not about force, it's about energetic congruence. If you want to collapse the distance between you and what you desire, you must become ruthlessly honest about what you believe you're worth, and then do the inner work to raise that standard. Not just in words, but in energy, behavior, and self-perception, because until your identity expands, your reality cannot. Imagine trying to build a new life on top of a crumbling foundation. That's exactly what it's like to manifest without addressing your unresolved emotional debt. According to Owen Hermstring in The Law Behind the Laws, most people are unknowingly weighed down by the unprocessed emotions of their past: sadness, anger, shame, betrayal. And they carry these frequencies into every intention, affirmation, and visualization. What they don't realize is that emotion is the language of the field, and when that language is distorted, manifestation becomes scrambled. Hermstring describes emotional debt as the energy of everything you felt but never released. It's the weight of every disappointment you silenced, every heartbreak you bypassed, every frustration you swallowed to keep the peace. Over time, this emotional debt doesn't just stay buried, it becomes encoded into your energetic field. And since the field doesn't respond to what you say you want, but to what you vibrate, you end up attracting from pain rather than power. The shocking part: most of this happens outside of awareness. People assume they've moved on from past experiences simply because they don't think about them anymore. But Hermstring explains that what you avoid emotionally, you attract vibrationally. That ex you never forgave, that childhood rejection you never voiced, that loss you never truly mourned, it's all still active in your field, quietly shaping your expectations, reactions, and outcomes. Here's where the frequency trap becomes dangerous. Suppressed emotions don't disappear, they mutate. Sadness turns into numbness, rage becomes anxiety, shame shows up as self-sabotage. And these emotional distortions make it nearly impossible to hold a clean frequency. You might try to align with abundance, but your suppressed scarcity trauma leaks into your thoughts. You might visualize love, but the unhealed betrayal in your body still vibrates louder than your affirmations. To break this loop, Hermstring urges radical energetic hygiene. That means feeling what you've been avoiding, not to stay stuck in the past, but to liberate your future. He recommends daily emotional audits, sitting in silence, checking in with the body, asking where tension lives and what memories it might be holding. When you give yourself permission to feel deeply without judgment or suppression, you begin to discharge the stored pain. And in doing so, you free up energetic bandwidth. Hermstring also warns against spiritual bypassing, the tendency to cover emotional wounds with positivity. You don't raise your vibration by pretending pain doesn't exist, he writes. You raise it by embracing the pain without becoming it. This means facing discomfort with compassion, allowing grief to move through you, giving space for anger to be heard, and creating a safe internal space for your own emotional truth. Paradoxically, this vulnerability becomes your greatest access point to power. When emotional debt is cleared, your field becomes stable. Intentions start landing with precision. Life stops feeling like a tug-of-war between your dreams and your wounds. You begin to attract from a place of coherence, not chaos. And perhaps most importantly, you stop fearing your emotions. You realize they were never your enemy. They were simply unintegrated signals trying to get your attention so you could come back to wholeness. In manifestation, clarity is currency, but emotional debt keeps your field foggy. You don't need more affirmations, you need less emotional distortion, because when your energy is clean, your intentions become magnetic. You don't chase alignment, you are alignment. There's a moment in Owen Hermstring's The Law Behind the Laws where he asks a deceptively simple question: are your thoughts yours, or are they just echoes of the past? For most people, the answer is unsettling. Because when we look closer, we begin to realize that what we think, what we expect, and what we anticipate from life isn't consciously chosen. It's been looped so many times that it feels like truth. But it's not truth. It's programming. This is what Hermstring calls the echo chamber effect, the energetic feedback loop where your thoughts, shaped by past experiences and emotions, bounce endlessly within your mental field, reinforcing the very reality you're trying to escape. It's why people say things like, "Nothing ever works for me," or "I always attract the same kind of toxic partner," or "Money just doesn't flow in my life." These aren't just beliefs, they are vibrational declarations constantly mirrored back by the field. The most dangerous part, the field doesn't judge, it simply responds. So if your internal echo says, "I'm stuck," the quantum responds by organizing circumstances, people and events that prove you're stuck. Not because the universe is punishing you, but because frequency precedes form. And if your mental frequency never changes, your outer world can't evolve. Hermstring explains that most people confuse thinking with creation. But thought alone doesn't manifest. Emotionally charged thought does. And if your thoughts are emotionally tied to your past, to trauma, fear, scarcity, then every new thought is just a slightly different version of an old wound. You think you're being productive, imagining success or love or health, but energetically you're just rehearsing your limitations. That's the echo chamber in action. It works like this. You wake up and your brain immediately starts running the familiar script: worries, to-dos, expectations, regrets. These thoughts spark familiar emotions: stress, frustration, numbness. Those emotions reinforce the same thoughts. And the loop begins again. Over time, this loop becomes an identity. You don't just have certain thoughts, you become them, and your energetic field, loyal to your dominant identity, obeys. So how do you break the echo chamber? Hermstring offers a counterintuitive approach: disruption, not by force, but by frequency. He writes, "To shift reality, you don't need to control your thoughts, you need to raise your presence." What he means is that most attempts to think positively fail because they're done from the same frequency that created the negative thought in the first place. You're still in the loop, just using prettier words. True shift happens when you step out of mind and into awareness. Awareness interrupts the loop. When you observe a thought instead of reacting to it, you break the echo. When you feel an emotion instead of avoiding it, you discharge its grip. When you become present, fully in the now, the past has no room to repeat itself, and from that space new thoughts emerge, not from survival, but from soul. Hermstring also emphasizes the power of non-linear practices, music, dance, breathwork, nature immersion, as ways to shake up the vibrational monotony of mental repetition. These experiences don't work through logic, they work through resonance. They bypass the echo and deliver you directly to a new frequency, and once your frequency changes, the field must adjust. It has no choice. This is why awareness is more powerful than effort. You can't outthink your echo, but you can out-vibrate it. The echo chamber effect is real. It's subtle, seductive, and rooted in decades of unconscious conditioning, but it's not permanent. When you become the observer instead of the echo, you stop repeating and start receiving. Owen Hermstring introduces a striking concept in The Law Behind the Laws that most people overlook. The energy field doesn't give you what you want. It gives you what you match. This mismatch between desire and frequency is not just an abstract spiritual idea. It's the silent agreement you make with your own reality, and it explains why you can do all the right things and still receive the wrong results. He calls it the field mismatch, and it operates like a contract, invisible but binding. The contract says, I want this, but I am energetically agreeing to something else. For example, you might say you want financial abundance, but your nervous system is still wired for survival, fear, and uncertainty. You might declare your openness to love, but deep down you still expect betrayal, rejection, or abandonment. These are not flaws in your logic, they are vibrational contracts signed in the past. Hermstring writes, your field listens to your being, not your voice. That means it doesn't respond to what you say you want, it responds to what you actually believe, feel, expect, and accept. The mismatch happens when the surface-level desire contradicts the deeper-level frequency, and the energetic field, which cannot lie, simply mirrors the truth underneath. This is why so many affirmations fail. You can repeat, I am wealthy 1,000 times, but if your emotional baseline is anxiety about money, the field detects that conflict. It doesn't punish you. It simply obeys your strongest signal. And most often, that signal comes not from your words, but from your inner agreements about what is safe, normal, and deserved. This is where Hermstring's work becomes especially powerful. He insists that you are not attracting what you desire. You are attracting what you believe is available to you without punishment. That line alone disrupts years of surface-level manifestation content. It shows us that our field isn't being sabotaged by fate or failure. It's being shaped by the emotional terms we agreed to when we were children, when we were heartbroken, when we were told not to ask for too much, not to shine too brightly, not to expect more than what others had. So how do you break the field mismatch? Hermstring doesn't say to work harder or visualize longer. Instead, he proposes something more radical: rewrite the contract. The first step is to uncover it. What unspoken rule have you been following? That you're only worthy if you struggle? That joy must be earned through suffering? That success makes you unsafe or alone? These unconscious laws were signed under pressure, usually in moments of pain. They were survival codes, but now they are outdated. Once revealed, these codes must be gently replaced, not with forced positivity, but with aligned frequency. That means you don't need to fight for what you want. You need to become the version of you who no longer resists having it. That's where alignment happens. When your nervous system, identity, and expectations are all in sync with your desire, the field finally opens. There is no more mismatch, only magnetic flow. One passage from the book illustrates this with clarity. Energy doesn't reward who tries hardest. It reveals who's aligned deepest. This shifts the whole paradigm. It's not about deserving through effort. It's about matching through truth. The field mismatch is the reason effort fails, and silence speaks louder than intention. It's not about what you're doing wrong. It's about what you've silently agreed to. And the moment you revoke that contract, everything begins to move. Owen Hermstring introduces one of the most unsettling yet eye-opening revelations in The Law Behind the Laws. Most people are not chasing their desires, they're addicted to the absence of those desires. This energetic addiction is what he calls the loop of lack. And it's not just a metaphor. It's a repeating frequency signature in your field, programmed to keep you seeking but never receiving. Why would someone unconsciously choose to stay in lack? Hermstring explains that the answer lies in the emotional safety it provides. When a person spends their entire life in emotional or material scarcity, the absence itself becomes familiar. Familiarity is comfort, and comfort is what the nervous system craves more than transformation. So even though the conscious mind says, I want success, the deeper programming says, but I know how to survive without it. This is the root of the loop of lack. It's not that you're failing. It's that your identity is bonded to the energy of absence, and that absence creates a false sense of control. You know who you are in the void. You know how to be the struggler, the seeker, the one who's almost there. But do you know how to be the person who already has? That's where the field begins to resist. Not because of your worth, but because of your programming. Hermstring puts it clearly. If you are emotionally bonded to absence, you will sabotage the arrival. This means even when opportunities show up, the relationship, the money, the breakthrough, you will find a way to lose it, delay it, or disqualify yourself from it. Why? Because you don't recognize yourself in the version of you who already has what you want. And if you don't recognize yourself, the identity must eject the experience to return to safety. This is the invisible trap that keeps people looping. They do the work, they make progress, they get a taste of success. But then, slowly or suddenly, they fall back because the absence feels more aligned with who they believe they are. To break this cycle, Hermstring offers a radical shift in focus. Stop chasing the result and start shifting your emotional baseline. What does that mean? It means your job is no longer to achieve the manifestation, but to become emotionally safe in its presence. You must normalize the feeling of already having it before it arrives. That's the only way the field can hold it when it comes. This is not toxic positivity, it's frequency familiarity. If you've spent 20 years in lack, your nervous system doesn't yet know how to digest abundance. It will reject it like a foreign substance. So your work is to acclimate your field, not through fantasy, but through slow, grounded repetition of new emotional truths. I can have and hold. I am safe in the having. I am no longer addicted to absence. Hermstring writes, when the field no longer vibrates to loss, it no longer needs to recreate it. That line carries a quiet power. It tells us that the field isn't cruel, it's just consistent. When your frequency changes, your outcomes must follow. This loop isn't broken by force. It's broken by frequency fluency. You stop feeding the identity of the chaser, and you begin practicing the vibration of the one who no longer needs to chase, the one who is at peace with the present, not because they've given up, but because they've finally remembered who they are without the void. In the final pages of The Law Behind the Laws, Owen Hermstring presents a powerful message that many overlook. Transformation does not require more effort. It requires energetic closure. What continues to sabotage your evolution is not always what you're missing, but what you refuse to release. The energetic field you emit, your reality generator, cannot maintain alignment with both the new identity and the old attachment. One must collapse. This is where Hermstring introduces the closure code. It's not a ritual, not a trick, not a chant. It is a decisive energetic process where you revoke access to anything in your field that no longer vibrates in harmony with your next becoming. That includes people, beliefs, stories, behaviors, and even dreams that were forged in past identities. If it was born from survival or self-abandonment, it cannot live in your field of freedom. He writes, what you haven't consciously unplugged from, you are still unconsciously feeding. And what you feed, you create. This explains why even after years of self-work, people find themselves repeating old patterns, because the loops are still energetically open, and open loops run energy. The closure code demands courage, not because it's violent, but because it requires clarity. It asks you to look at your life and tell the truth. What am I still keeping alive that is no longer me? What emotional contracts have I never closed? What dynamics do I still participate in because I'm afraid of what silence might bring? Most people aren't blocked by lack. They're blocked by loyalty. Loyalty to past versions of self, to inherited patterns, to unspoken agreements that say, I'll keep playing small so others feel safe. These contracts must be ended, not in drama but in decision. Hermstring teaches that closure doesn't require a conversation, it requires a command. And that command is internal. You say to your field, this is no longer who I am. This story, this energy, this version, I release it now. I call back my power from it. I am not here to sustain what was. I am here to transmit what is becoming. Once that command is declared, not merely as words, but as a cellular knowing, the field adjusts. That's how manifestation accelerates, not because you asked more clearly, but because you cleared more space. Your reality does not respond to your words, it responds to your capacity, and your capacity expands when you end the leaks. Hermstring explains that people mistake closure for trauma. They think saying goodbye is pain, but the real pain is in carrying what no longer fits. The real trauma is staying energetically fused to dynamics that shrink you. Closure is not the wound, it's the medicine. He leaves the reader with a haunting truth. Your next level isn't waiting for you to prove yourself. It's waiting for you to unplug from what you've already outgrown. So the final step in escaping the frequency traps is not about doing more. It's about letting go, ending the story, deactivating the contracts, releasing the identities. When you do this, the field doesn't just shift, it opens. And in that openness, you finally receive what could never land in a space filled with outdated noise. This is the secret that explains why so many efforts fail, not because you didn't believe, not because you didn't try hard enough, but because you never ended the agreements with what was. The moment you do, you begin living as the frequency of the outcome, and reality has no choice but